Recording in progress.
Okay. Are we ready? Okay. All right. I will call to order the Monday, September 27th, 2021 meeting of the Oregon City Planning Commission. We are going to be switching the two agenda items around because the first item is probably going to have more, we're going to be discussing that one longer than the second one, which is just going to be a continuance. So we're going to begin with continuance of GLUA, I'm sorry. Are there any public comments of any items not on the agenda? Okay, all right. All right, so continuance of GLUA 21-00029, Series Farm Planned Unit Development. It's a master plan, detailed development plan. It's a lot of things, but since we're just continuing it, there's nothing to review right now. So it's a legislative agenda item, so I'm going to start with the legislative script.
The continuance should be quasi-judicial.
Correct?
Which one are we on?
It's a yeah, we switched them around.
Are we doing the continuance?
Yes, we're doing a continuance first.
Okay. For a continuance, does that have to have the script read?
Not if nobody talks about it in any particular way, but if you do, then it would be nice to have the script read. So there's a little bit of a conundrum because you don't know if someone's going to talk about it until someone talks about it. And so out of an abundance of caution, it's just easier to read the script, but good question.
Yes, in case there's a discussion, we need to read the script.
Okay.
All right, so I'm going to start with the quasi-judicial hearing script. One public hearing on land use applications is scheduled tonight. Our role is to conduct a public hearing and to make decisions about the matter before us. In making those decisions, we must apply the applicable codes and laws and cannot vary from or change those laws or codes. Members of the Planning Commission are to be unbiased. Before the start of the hearing, I will ask the Planning Commissioners whether they have any potential conflicts, such as family, financial, or business relationships with any of the applicants or with regard to the land in question. I will also ask whether any of the Planning Commissioners have discussed the application in question with any of the parties or have independent knowledge of relevant facts, such as from a visit to the site in question. Any member of the audience may question any Planning Commissioner about their disclosures. A staff report has been prepared for each application and has been made available to the public 7 days before the first public hearing. The staff report identifies the approval criteria that apply to each applicant's proposal. Staff has analyzed the criteria which are contained in the staff report. The quasi-judicial hearing procedure that the Planning Commission will follow is set out in state law and the Oregon City Municipal Code. The hearing procedure steps are shown on the Planning Commission website. Public testimony will be called in the order it was requested in advance of the meeting. If you have not emailed city staff at planning@OregonCity, which is ORCITY.org, to request to speak and would like to testify, please raise your virtual or physical hand when I ask if there are others in the audience who would like to participate. For the public record, please begin all testimony stating your name and city of residence. If you would like to receive a copy of the notice of decision, please state your mailing address or email address. Testimony and evidence should be directed towards the applicable approval criteria. If you believe other criteria apply in addition to those addressed in the staff report, identify and discuss those criteria and explain how and why you believe they apply to the application under consideration. Any person may submit written material while the public record is open on each application. Any written materials received by the city staff during the time period in which the record is open will be placed in the record. Written materials submitted during the public hearing must be presented to the city staff in order to become part of the record. If a person intends for PowerPoint presentations, reports, pictures, or other exhibits used in their oral testimony to be placed in the record, copies must be submitted to city staff while the record is open. If they are not given to staff, they will not be included in the record. Any person wishing a continuance to present additional evidence and testimony or to keep the record open to respond to new evidence must make that request before the public testimony portion of the hearing is closed. If the Planning Commission makes a decision with which you disagree, any issue that you may wish to appeal must have been raised for the record for the consideration of the City Commission or LUBA or both. Without raising the issue on the record with sufficient detail and accompanied by statements or evidence that the city and all parties can respond to, the issue will not be deemed appealable to the City Commission or State Land Use Board of Appeals. In addition, the failure of an applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient detail to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Now we'll open the record for Oregon City file. This is the GLUA 21-00029 Series Farm Plan Unit Development. I'm just going to read them all for the record. MAS 21-00003 Master Plan Planned Unit Development. MAS 21-00004 Detailed Development Plan Phase 1. MAS 21-00005 Detailed Development Plan Phase 2. Sub 21-00001 Subdivision 124 lots, and NROD 21-00006 Natural Resources Overlay District. We'll now ask each planning commissioner if they have any ex parte contacts, conflicts of interest, bias, or any other statement to declare or have visited the site. If there were a site visit, the planning commissioner must declare what he or she perceived. I'll start to my left. Commissioner Mitchell, any conflicts of interest, ex parte contacts, and have you visited the site?
No ex parte contacts, no bias. I have not yet visited the site, but I plan to do so before we take this up again. No conflicts of interest, but I want to mention two things tonight, and I'll do it again when we actually discuss this at our next meeting. They're not conflicts of interest, but I want them on the record. Number one, 13 or 14 years ago, whatever it was, when we moved to Oregon City, Icon Construction, who's the applicant in this, built our home for us. And the second thing is, 3 years or so ago, when I unsuccessfully ran for city commission, Mark Handress, who's the owner of Icon Construction, did contribute to my campaign.
Do you believe that you can make an unbiased decision?
I'm sorry, you're hard to hear. Maybe bring your...
Do you believe that you can make an unbiased decision based on the applicable approval criteria?
Yes, I do.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Commissioner Staggs, any conflicts of interest, ex parte contacts, bias, any other statement you'd like to declare, and have you visited the site?
I have not visited the site. I have no ex parte contact, and I have no conflict of interest.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Stoll, any ex parte contact, conflicts of interest, bias, any statement you'd like to declare, and have you visited the site?
No to all of the above. I know nothing of this project.
Okay. As for myself, I have not had any ex parte contacts, no conflicts of interest, no bias. I'll declare something. As far as visiting the site, the only time I visited the site was to go to Ceres Farms and buy cucumbers. So as far as the development, since we haven't been shown any of the documents, I know nothing about the development. I don't know anybody at Icon Construction. That's about all I can say about that. Would anybody in the audience like to question any of the commissioners about their statements? Okay. All right. Is there a staff report?
No, we don't have a staff report at this time, just a staff recommendation for the continuance to a date certain of October 25th.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I move that we continue GLUA 21-00029 to the meeting on October 25th, 2001.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion by Commissioner Staggs and Commissioner Stoll, and a second by Commissioner Mitchell. And there's no communication, and nobody wants to talk about this? Okay, all right. Call roll.
All right. Commissioner Staggs,
Aye.
Commissioner Mitchell,
Aye.
Commissioner Stoll,
Aye.
and Chair Schlagenhofer.
Aye. Okay, motion passes. So now we're going to go back to agenda item number 1, which is a legislative file. And for that one, we need to read the legislative script. Okay. A public hearing on a legislative application is scheduled for tonight. Our role is to conduct a public hearing and to make recommendations about the matter before us. In making those decisions, we must apply the applicable codes and laws and cannot vary from or change those laws or codes. The staff report identifies the approval criteria that apply to each applicant's proposal. Upon a recommendation from the Planning Commission on a legislative action, the City Commission shall hold at least one public hearing on the proposal. Any interested person may provide written or oral testimony on the proposal at or prior to the hearing. Public testimony will be called on in the order it was requested in advance of the meeting. If you have not emailed city staff at planning@orcity.org to request to speak and would like to testify, please do so now and identify the item you would like to speak on. For the public record, please begin all testimony stating your name and city of residence. If you would like to receive a copy of the notice of decision, please state your mailing address or email address. 5 minutes for representatives of a recognized neighborhood association, government agency, or other incorporated public interest organization, and we give 3 minutes for individuals. Members of the Planning Commission are to be unbiased. As a result, I will call on each commissioner to disclose any potential conflicts, such as family, financial, or business relationships with any of the applicants or with regard to the land in question. At this point, does any commissioner have any conflicts of interest?
No.
No.
Okay, and for myself, also no. Is that good enough, or do we need to? Okay, so we have no conflicts of interest. Does anyone in the audience wish to question any of the planning commissioners about our disclosures? Okay. We will now commence with the staff report for legislative file number LEG 21-00003, adoption of Park Place Urbanization Study and amendment to the Transportation System Plan.
Thank you, Chair Schlagenhofer.
Thank you.
I'm Kelly Reed, planner with the Community Development Department, and I'm sorry, am I out of turn? Okay, I thought I didn't catch something. So this is the, yes?
Can't hear very well.
Okay, I'll speak louder. I'm here to give you a staff report for a legislative application, which is for the adoption of the Park Place Urbanization Plan as an ancillary document to the city's adopted transportation system plan. Go ahead, next slide. Oh, I have a clicker here. Thanks. So the process for legislative hearings is a type 4 process. There are public hearings before the Planning Commission. Planning Commission makes a recommendation to the City Commission, and then the City Commission will conducts the hearings and adopts an ordinance to adopt the plan or the legislative amendment. Any number of hearings can be part of a legislative process. So however many hearings it takes, And there is no deadline as we have with quasi-judicial applications, so there's no 120-day deadline. There are no ex parte contacts for legislative files. These are legislative matters, not quasi-judicial. There is, as you just said, a conflict of interest disclosure, however. And then if we have public comments, which it looks like we will provide a public comment matrix, and we'll update that at each hearing as needed. And that those public comments will continue forward to, with the Planning Commission's recommendation to the City Commission. So the proposed plan that you're looking at today is the Park Place Urbanization Plan. Josh Wheeler, the Assistant City Engineer, is here to tell you about the content of the plan. And so I'm just going to touch on it very lightly. It amends the transportation system plan by adopting this plan as an ancillary document. It does not include any code amendments to the municipal code, and there are no proposed changes to the transportation system plan capital improvement project list. You can see the study area there is a large portion of the Park Place neighborhood, mostly the already developed portions of that neighborhood where we see lots of existing housing stock. So the plan includes specific street designs for a few different street segments within the neighborhood. These street segments are concentrated in the area north of Holcomb Boulevard and west of Holcomb Elementary. Includes street design for Apperson Street, Front Avenue, Hunter Avenue north of Holcomb, Swan Avenue, and then a handful of other local streets that are referred to as family-friendly routes. The plan also includes a sidewalk improvement prioritization map. Josh will tell you more about all of this. And so if you had a chance to review the written staff report, it includes an analysis of the plan against the city's comprehensive plan goals and policies. That's our approval criteria for tonight. And I've listed out the sections of the comprehensive plan that are relevant here. And if you have any questions at all about any particular goal or policy, I'm happy to answer that, but I'm not going to go through the full list as part of my staff report. So really the questions for the Planning Commission tonight as part of this review are, is this plan consistent with our comprehensive plan? Is it consistent with the intent of our transportation system plan? And has the city followed the legislative and public engagement process to your satisfaction? So really those are the high level questions that you're here to answer. We recommend that you hear the public testimony, ask any questions, give us direction on anything that you might wish us to bring back to you. And then when you're ready, give a recommendation for the City Commission for adoption of the plan. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Reed.
Sure. Quick question, just to be clear for those who are in the audience here or listening. After we make our recommendation to the City Commission, and the City Commission conducts at least one hearing, is their hearing based on the record from our hearing, or will they be taking new testimony at their hearing?
All the public testimony follows the agenda item. So when this goes to the commission, their agenda packet will include all the comments that we've received. We will put together the public comment matrix that will summarize the comments and respond to the comments. So that will be all part of the record. However, the record will still be open so that people do want to testify at the City Commission again, or if they didn't testify here, they can still testify at the City Commission.
Okay, good, thank you.
Okay, just to make sure we're clear on that, would they be able to bring up anything new at the city commission?
Yes, this is a legislative file, not a quasi judicial.
Okay.
So
All right.
any type of comment is okay.
Okay, all right, okay, excellent. Okay, so before we take public comments, any questions for Ms. Reed? Okay, all right, public comments? I have 4, I'm going to go into order.
And Chair Schlagenhofer?
Yes.
We also have a short presentation from the applicant, in this case, the Public Works Department.
I did not see that on here, okay. And that is going to be
Josh Wheeler, our
Josh
Assistant
Wheeler, that's
City
what I
Engineer.
thought it was. Sorry about that, Josh.
Got the mic on now. Hi, good evening. My name is Josh Wheeler. I'm the city's assistant city engineer, and I'm the project manager for this Park Place urbanization plan. The plan was determined to be needed by development staff due to the existing older Park Place neighborhood originally being developed under county standards with inconsistent improvements and a lack of urbanization to the existing street network. This study was also considered based on community feedback of a desire to see additional sidewalks within the neighborhood. The focus of the study was to determine existing problems and then determine what should be built and where, what some of these improvements will cost, and how they should be prioritized. The study assumes that a majority of improvements would be completed by private development. However, projects may be considered as capital projects if funds become available. The focus of the study here is the area shown in red, outlined in red. It's generally west of Swan. Most of the neighborhood to the east of Swan is already recently developed and not in need of urbanization. Concept areas and recently annexed properties were not considered, as those developments will follow our typical standards in the Transportation System Plan, or the TSP. This study was about planning for the urbanization of the existing property as deemed desirable and as needed. So a significant amount of the study area does not include sidewalks, as shown in green. So if you see a lot of green lines on the map, those are missing sidewalks. Some segments have been built through piecemeal development, resulting in sidewalks that are hit and miss, and create barriers to pedestrian travel. Sidewalks are one of the most important and desired improvements in this neighborhood. To see that a little more up close, this is a zoomed in picture, and you can see how those gaps may exist in various areas, but there's a lot of missing sidewalk in general overall. This is what some of those pedestrian challenges look like. On the left side of your picture, you see an end of a sidewalk. You see one going right into a existing house in the middle picture. And on the right, you see no transition up on Ames Street. So these are some of the issues that exist currently in the Park Place neighborhood. We also found a number of bicycle challenges. We weren't only looking at pedestrian connectivity, but also for bicycle connectivity. And for the most part, no bicycle lanes or sharrows or any type of notation or signage exist for bikes at this time, except some bike lanes that are on Holcomb Boulevard. We also have some vehicular challenges. The size of existing narrow streets was reviewed to determine if they are desired to remain or if they should be expanded, or if they're desired to be expanded, if they have room to be expanded based on existing structure locations, environmental constraints, and other. These are some examples of the narrow roads. The one on the left is Hiram Avenue. It's about 16 feet of pavement. Our standard in our TSP is 24 feet for the smallest road we have. And then on the right side, you see variable width roadway, and that's for areas that have developed over time in a piecemeal fashion, and some of those get widened in pieces until the next place develops. One way we came to these conclusions that I'm going to show you at the end here is with neighborhood surveys. We did 2 surveys with the Park Place neighborhood specifically. We did not go out to the whole city because we wanted the Park Place neighborhood, the people who live there, to let us know what they wanted in their neighborhood. The first survey had about 200 responses, and it asked more general questions to understand the desire of the neighborhood. We found about 95% of those that took the survey were from that neighborhood. 57% of those drive the neighborhood, 91% walk. 58% believe that if there were more sidewalks, they would walk more often. 62% said that for bikes. And 2 of their issues were lack of sidewalks and speeding in the neighborhood. And while this study does not address speeding, it does attempt to address sidewalks. Our second survey had about 100 respondents, and it asked more specific questions. So at this point, we had created the draft plan and proposed some cross sections of roadways to the community. And here you see an example of on the left, Hunter Avenue. We showed them a cross section of what it would look like, and 77% supported that cross section. And on the right side, we had a picture of the family-friendly routes, where they would be and what they would look like, and 82% of those supported that. So we ultimately came up with a roadway classification plan. And in this picture, you'll see that the dark blue roads, they are road-specific plans that have specific cross-sections. The green-colored roads are intended to remain more rural in nature, more of a, not as much urbanization to them. And the light blue or the cyan color are roads which would retain or be built out of the TSP as a local road standard that we already have in our current standards. And here are some examples of those cross sections. The one on the left is Apperson Street. The one on the right is Front Avenue. We foresee Apperson Street being built out over time using shared bike and auto lanes with sidewalks. For Front Avenue, we anticipate seeing parking remaining and being built along Front Avenue with shared bike and automobiles, and then sidewalks. And then we also have specific ones for Hunter and Swan. Hunter, we see parking being allowed, but again, that shared bike and auto with separated sidewalks with trees. And then the Swan Avenue would also have those separated sidewalks, but have a separated bike lane that would provide more north-south connectivity and provide a place to more safely ride a bike. All of these cross sections have the ability to mold to an existing environmental situation. In fact, at the top of those diagrams, it actually has a disclaimer that says if you have geologic hazards or a unique situation, a natural resource, that then we do things to reduce the cross section to meet those constraints. And the last one I'm showing here is the family-friendly route, where the cars and the bikes use the same road in a much narrower way. Curb-tight sidewalks, which probably wouldn't even have curb at this point, depending on the road, but a much smaller cross-section to leave those small roads that are already narrow in nature, but at least consistently narrow in nature, rather than kind of varying widths. And then we prioritize sidewalks. One of the largest things we heard in our public discussions with the Park Place neighborhood was the lack of sidewalks. And so we created a sidewalk prioritization plan. The blue shows priority 1, the green shows priority 2. The only reason we separated those out was to try and show if we found money, if there was a grant opportunity, if there was a new funding platform from the state or the federal government, where could we build some sidewalks as a capital project? This would be the areas we would focus on, not in any specific order. You'll see on the next slide that the Priority 1 sidewalks is around $2.1 million. The Priority 2 sidewalks is about $1.7 million. Those are not projects that we would anticipate doing as a whole. We would anticipate these to be much smaller, and we would probably seek neighborhood feedback at the time we would implement any of those plans if we could. More often than not, this will be created by development, but this plan is right here, the sidewalk priority plan is really, if we had CIP, capital improvement money, this is how we would try and use it. So that's really the purpose of the prioritization. And that's the numbers I gave you previously. It's around 7,600 lineal feet of sidewalk in Priority 1, almost 5,700 in Priority 2. And that's the contents of the plan and all the technical things that are in there. If you have any questions, I am here for that. Tonight, your options are either to provide a recommendation tonight if you feel that your questions have been answered, or if you're seeking additional information, to request that to us so that we can come back at a future meeting and provide that to you. Thank you.
Okay, I do have a couple things to say, but I want to give the other commissioners a chance first in case they've got the same ideas. Who wants to start?
Oh, I've just got one quick question now, but I'd like to come back and ask Mr. Wheeler some more questions after we hear the public comment.
Okay.
That's all right. You mentioned 200 respondents in the first survey. How many residents are in the study area?
Oh, I wish I had that number. I do not have that number. I can bring that back to you. But a postcard was given to every resident and property owner and person that lives there throughout that entire red boundary. And then we also had an email sent from the Park Place neighborhood to the people that are on their email list. And so that's how we made people aware of the survey.
Okay, thank you. I'll have more questions later.
Commissioner Stoll.
Yeah, you said the transportation existing plan requires a 24-foot paved width. Is that 24 feet of travel lane, or is that 24 feet of combined travel and parking or bike lane? What's the current standard for that?
For a local road, and I may be not speaking completely correctly, I did say 24 feet, but that would be just the driving lane, so that does not include bike lanes or
So two
anything else.
12-foot lanes, okay.
Yeah, so two 12-foot lanes.
So just looking at the staff report, the Front Avenue cross-section has 9-foot travel lanes, which seems extraordinarily narrow to me. I just measured my truck in the parking lot, and with the mirrors, it's 9.5 feet wide. So that seems, how did you come up with that? How did you come up with a 7-foot parking lane and a 9-foot travel lane?
That was determined because that's the existing cross-section of that road right now, where it's built out. In the areas where it's not built out, it's much narrower. And so we felt bringing that cross-section, continuing when development occurs, made a lot of sense rather than trying to reinvent the wheel that's already been invented there. It is narrow, but it does seem to work for that roadway.
Okay, so there's already sections of that cross-section built because of joining development?
Yes.
Okay, and the same with Hunter with the 10-foot travel lanes?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that just seems really, really, really narrow. Especially, and I'll throw it out there, especially for emergency vehicles. Because if you have parking on each side, there's nowhere for anybody to go when a fire engine goes through there, and they have to crawl through at 5 miles an hour, and the ambulance is the same thing. That's really, really narrow.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. The minimum size typically desired by the fire department is 20 feet.
Right.
What we found with this unique neighborhood, going from a county standard to a urban standard, was to try and balance what the modern standard is, that local road section from the TSP that likely cannot be built without a lot of demolition occurring, and then safety, and trying to figure out where the balance is between that. That was the challenge with trying to create these cross sections, and the need for this study so that we weren't tearing down buildings that didn't want to be torn down to meet the TSP section, that we needed something to adapt this area to our standards.
So the built-out sections already have whatever what would that be, total pavement width? 33 feet of pavement width with parking on one or both sides?
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Staggs?
I had a couple of questions. Holcomb Road is in the study area, but that is a separately funded project? The improvements to Holcomb Road, is that right?
Yeah, so Holcomb is in the study area, but was not studied because there's a separate plan called the Holcomb Pedestrian Plan, and that's what we follow for Holcomb.
Okay. And then the other question was, how did you, just for everyone's understanding, how did you prioritize where the improvements would happen in the study area?
And so
Is that solely based on the survey, or?
You're talking about the prioritization of the sidewalks?
Yeah.
Yeah. The prioritization of the sidewalks was determined over a number of items. It was community feedback. We looked at all of the places that someone would go, such as the churches, the convenience stores, those types of places, the schools. Then we looked at connectivity. Where is existing sidewalks where we could finish it out because it's almost finished to have a path? And so we looked at all those types of factors to try and go, okay, biggest bang for a buck to really get connectivity and need, and then secondarily, what would happen if we had more money? So, number of factors.
Great, thanks.
Okay, thank you. So my question is, can you bring up the map that's got basically the blueprint of all the roads that were considered in the plan? I believe every road has some kind of planning done on it. The one that had all the colors. And where I'm going with it is, I know this is a blueprint for most of the roads, but as you said, and I believe I read it in there somewhere, that a lot of it is not likely to be funded. So even though there's design ideas for all these roads, most of them are probably not going to happen. Or it would take a lot of money that we're not going to get to be able to make them happen. Because I don't know why, I can't be certain why a lot of the people are here, but I can imagine some of the concern might be, how much yard will I lose? Are they going to pay for my shed if that thing gets torn down? Stuff like that. So I think it's good for the people to know, what are the odds of certain roads, what's going to happen on certain roads. You've definitely highlighted the ones that are more likely to happen, but it's still, there's going to be a lot of money involved in making anything happen there, especially if there's no development to fuel it. So maybe if you could mention, describe the odds of some of the smaller neighborhoods. Is it ever going to happen? Are we talking 10 years, 30 years? What does it look like?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
The challenge with creating planning documents is the expectation that things will get built once they're planned. And that becomes a challenge for us, finding funding to implement those projects. The true purpose of this plan was not to create a capital improvement plan. That is for the TSP, that is for the other master plan documents. The purpose of this plan was to provide staff and developers and those willing to develop their own properties guidance that made sense for an old rural area that has desires to have some form of urbanization. And we've done this on areas such as Lynn, Leland, Myers, the road that becomes Lynn, then Leland, and Myers. We have a corridor plan for that to say, don't really follow the TSP, follow the Lynn, Leland corridor plan. We have a few other plans like that aren't coming to mind at the moment, but that was the goal of this one. Instead of focusing on Hunter or Swan or something like that, we said, how do we urbanize this neighborhood? And it's really about development doing it But we do recognize that once in a blue moon, you do end up with either reprioritized funds from the general fund, from a grant, from an ARA funding that we had during the Obama administration, these monies that come kind of out of nowhere. And so we will be prepared for that in case we do get those opportunities. But the likelihood that these will be capital projects is not our intent. It's not our expectation. We already have a lot of projects from the TSP and other documents that we need to implement and fund, which are all underfunded, as is typical with any government. But this one is not intended to be a city-funded plan. It really is, it's there to be a development-driven plan, and the city has opportunities if the funds do come from somewhere.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the excellent explanation. Okay. Any more questions for Mr. Wheeler?
Right now.
Okay, any more questions for anybody before we take public comments?
I can answer the population question.
Okay, Ms. Reed?
Thanks. I was able to look at our neighborhood data on our city website after you asked that question. So the 2020 population of Park Place is 3,337, estimated.
Thank you. 1,337, I think. So 200 responses, 6%.
I would imagine that includes all ages as well.
But every resident got a card in the mail.
Household, every
household.
property owner, and then whoever lives there, if it's different than the property owner.
There are 1,146 households according to our data.
Okay. So we don't know anything about the cards that were returned, if there was anything in common with those, we don't know. We don't know if there was any, we don't know if it was a random return, we don't know if they had anything in common, and we just know 200 came back. That's all we know. Okay. Okay, correct. I don't know if we can take comments. I don't know if we can take questions. What do we do with questions?
I'd recommend you just go through your comment list, and then if there's more questions, you can add new people to the comment list if they would like to speak as well. So
I think we need to stick to protocol. If you could fill out a comment card, you can ask your question. I'm sorry, I can't hear you. I don't know what to do with this.
So just for the viewing audience, there was a question from the back. I believe that staff heard the question. I would recommend that staff just answer the question so that the community can testify. And then go after the answer, then you can start going through your testimony. Thank you.
You're a little hard to hear.
All right, so I can, the recommendation from the planning department is to go ahead and answer the question from the back. For the viewing audience, the question from the back was, what is a corridor plan and what is a corridor? And so the answer to that question is that a corridor plan is one that looks at just a small section of the city, one where it's a certain set of roads or a certain section of roads, such as the case of Lynn Leland Myers, where one becomes the next. And we have a certain cross section of road, bike lane, sidewalk, landscape area that is for that corridor. And so the Park Place Urbanization Plan is like a corridor plan, except it's for an entire neighborhood. So it's looking at individual streets within the urban. And so you could call it the Hunter Avenue corridor within that plan, has the Hunter cross section, and the Swan corridor would have the Swan cross section. And so that's what it means to have a corridor. So that answers that question.
Okay, thank you. Okay, are we ready for public comments? Okay. First public comment is Linda Smith. If you could come up, please state your name and your city of residence. You don't need to say your address or your email unless you'd like yes, there's fine. Make sure the light is on your microphone. And you have 3 minutes.
Hello, Linda Smith from Oregon City. I've lived in the Park Place neighborhood for 45 years on Cleveland Street, which is one of the streets that's planned to have some improvements if that ever happens. I have no objections to this urbanization plan, and I believe that it's probably well thought out. What I want to point out to the commission tonight is the survey responses. Survey number 1, question number 10 asked, what streets do you currently walk or bike on? And the number 1 answer was Holcomb Boulevard. 105 people answered that. Question 11, what streets would you most like to walk on where adequate facilities available? Number 1 answer was Holcomb Boulevard. Question number 12, what streets would you most like to bike on if they were dedicated spaces? Number 1 answer was Holcomb Boulevard. Survey number 2, question number 2, does the blue and green line prioritized on the correct placement of sidewalks? If no, what streets do you believe should be prioritized instead? 15 mentions of Holcomb Boulevard in the comments. Question number 6 asks about Hunter Boulevard, yet 2 people volunteered. Let's do Holcomb first, let's get it fixed. Question 8 asked about Swan, and yet 6 people volunteered comments about Holcomb. Question 10 asks about family-friendly streets, and yet again, Holcomb is mentioned. Question 13 asked for additional comments from anyone, and yet 15 neighbors brought up Holcomb. So I think you get my drift here, that Holcomb is the priority in our neighborhood. We don't care about all the other sidewalks and walkways and how wide the streets are or not. We've lived with it for a long, long time. Holcomb is a disaster. And I know it's on a separate plan, but I'm appealing to the Planning Commission to please look at that when it comes forward, or whoever in the city needs to hear that. We can't, when the wildfires happened last year, trying to get off that hillside off of Holcomb with that one single lane was a disaster. You can't walk down Holcomb at the bottom of the hill. There's no safe way to walk or bike down there with the speed of traffic coming up that hill down there. And so that's what my main concern is tonight, is just to say, the neighbors, the 200 that responded for the first survey and 100 and so on for the second, we are really concerned about Holcomb Boulevard and the safety. We want sidewalks, we want speed control, we want it wide, we want it lit. Yay, we're getting a crossing beacon on a couple of crosswalks there, but the rest of it needs to be taken care of. And I have no objections to this particular plan, but Holcomb is a priority. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, second card is Mr. Richard. I hope it's Guerrero. Thank you. I'm sorry, please state your name and city of residence.
Yeah, Richard Guerrero, Oregon City, again, Park Place neighborhood. Just going to reiterate, Holcomb. You didn't hear me the first time, Holcomb. That seems to be the priority. And I'm going to keep this short. My only other comment, so that I just don't say what this young woman said over again, is reading over some of the information, the linear square footage for these sidewalks didn't make sense. Just kind of questioning how those measurements were made, because some of the streets, and without giving you notes, some of them are much longer and shorter, yet, again, the linear square footage didn't make any sense. So just somebody could double check that work. And that's it. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and next we have Geneva Butterfield. And then there's another note here, daughter, PDA for Della Riggs. I'm not sure what that means.
I'm Geneva Butterfield, and I am the daughter in POA of Della Riggs, and she lives on the corner of Swan and Cleveland. She's lived there. We've all lived there. I am her caregiver. They've lived there since 1964, and when they first moved in, they were told that the housing project across the street was going to be putting in sidewalks, and that was 55 years ago. Nobody's done anything about that yet. My comment is that she is on the corner of Swan and Cleveland. She couldn't be here for health reasons, but she never got the first survey, and we had to ask for the second one. And she lives on 2 of those streets that are considered priority to put sidewalks on. Her house, I'd like to add this to the record if possible. I gave all the commissioners that, and it's got a lot of details on there. The house was put backwards from the plans because of supposedly historic aspect, and there were going to be sewer and electric put through that property, part of the property, so they put the house on a part of the property that's right close to the street. Now, for the 15, 20-foot setback, when the construction is done, it'll take it right up to my mom's porch. We were told we can't put in a temporary ramp for her because that goes into the right-of-way, and she would have to put in a sidewalk the extent of a full half block on Swan. And if there's any construction done on Cleveland Street, that takes away part of her sidewalk, her yard, and we understand that, but we were also told that since if she has to sell part of her property to pay for her sidewalks, then she loses the only driveway that goes into her detached barn property, and we can't put in a driveway there unless she makes the house a duplex to give it a separate address, and because there will be sidewalks there. And I don't know if that's miscommunication on my part, but I was told it by at least 2 people, and so those are things that we're concerned about. As far as the survey also, I know emails are sent out, but my mom is 82 and she doesn't check her computer. Other things, sorry, I'm just very nervous about this. I think one of the things about the area, I know that sidewalks would be a nice touch. However, speeding is really the worst part. We have accidents in front of our house all the time. I know they're not reported, but speed bumps would be probably a better idea of having things taken care of to slow traffic down. We understand and accept progress in the area, but we're hoping that we can take some time to figure out a way that we can take care of Cleveland Street. It's a very narrow road, especially at the bottom. There's a culvert, and the road narrows completely tightly, but down by a creek bed. And so a way to get it, I don't know how you would widen the street to make it safe to put a sidewalk on both sides or parking or anything, because it definitely narrows there. Anyway, I'm going to stop now because most of the details are in here, so I hope you can accept that. Thank you very much for your time, and I appreciate your help and we work on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't think I have one of those. Is this the only one? Or?
That's the letter that she just referred to.
Okay. For some reason, I don't have it. Or is this the one that came in? Well, I'm gonna read that. Let's keep going with the comments. Is it Ray Lester? Okay. All right. You're up. Thank you.
Ray Lester, live in Oregon City on Cleveland Street, next to Jenny and her mom here. I guess, first of all, the surveys, we did not receive the second survey. The first survey actually was put on my door a few days before the actual date it was to be turned in. So it was kind of no notice there on that either. I think my big question is, none of this details exactly what would take place if this were to happen. So I understand, you know, they've got their master plan, but what exactly is it entailing? How much, just, you know, what are you taking from the property? What's the cost? When's it going to happen? All that. I realize they say that it may never happen, but like he says, if they get a big grant tomorrow, boom, they could be on the way in 1 week. So how do we know and what the actual plan and everything is? I mean, the maps are great and everything, but it just shows a blue line that runs down to your front door. It doesn't tell you what that entails, what that means, what they're going to do. You know, the house sits next to a creek. Years ago, we were told you can never develop on the land that we have because of the creek. It's considered a protected wetland. That's changed over the years because they just built a house down the road of the creek because, you know, it's 10 feet from the creek now. So I guess that's no longer a wetland protected area anymore. But there are things that, you know, are affected by that. So in other words, if they take away the land and stuff to put in sidewalks and stuff, you know, we had a big issue years ago where the basement leaked because of the creek and stuff. We had to pay to have all these things done around the house and land brought in and built up around it and stuff to stop the leaking. what, how does that be affected? Is the house going to leak again? Is it going to slide down the hill now because they're taking away all the landscape in the front and the sides? I mean, what exactly are the details and the plans of what they plan to do, I guess, is more important to us, to me, is to know what exactly it entails. At the way it stands now, where the sidewalk ends next to our property, because they built all the new houses there, it would go directly through our driveway, take out the entire front yard and all the way down the side. So we would be left with about 3 feet of grass and that's it. So, I mean, it would be nice to know what the actual plan is and what it's going to look like before we know anything and go forward, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that's all I had. Would anything else show up? Anything online? Any more comments?
We did email a comment out earlier, so if you didn't receive the email this afternoon, there was a comment from Christine Kaczynski. We have a hard copy here available too if you need that.
I think we've all seen that one.
Okay.
All right. At this point, do we close the public hearing but leave the public record open?
Yes, you could do that, and you can provide an opportunity for the applicant's response, which would be Josh Wheeler with our engineering department. Can you hear me better now?
A little bit is better.
Okay, I'll work on it.
Okay, all right. So
I still have questions for Mr. Wheeler that I think need to be on the public record.
I wasn't going to close the record, I was going to close the public
Public comment.
comments.
Okay.
Yeah, so public comments are closed. But yeah, I think we need to discuss some of these things, and I think some of the concerns from the people are worth discussing. But let's just, who wants to start? Would you like to start, Commissioner Mitchell?
I can.
Okay,
I've got a list.
all right. We love your list.
There was a full report from from Wallace Engineering that we were provided. Do we have a copy of that we can bring up? It was one of the exhibits listed on the agenda.
Yes, one moment, please,
Thanks.
and we'll pull it up. Would you like the Assistant City Engineer to generally answer those questions while we're pulling up the map from the
Sure.
public testimony?
Yeah.
All right.
I'd be happy to. With respect to Holcomb Boulevard, during our whole public process, we did hear Holcomb Boulevard quite frequently in the comments. And while that was not a focus of the study, the Public Works Director and all the engineering staff is aware that that is a significant concern, significant desire of the residents of the Park Place neighborhood. We're currently doing, we currently reduced the speed on Holcomb. That went into effect not that terribly long ago. And we're currently under construction from now through about the mid-November for some rapid flashing beacons for signalized crosswalks at Swan Avenue and at Front Avenue. There are a couple major developments coming, such as the one that you continued tonight, that will be required to build some sidewalk to implement more of that Holcomb pedestrian plan. But as I've said previously, currently the city does not have a project on the books to build additional sidewalk on Holcomb, but through the biennium budget process, that could always change. And so during the next budget, that may be another opportunity to consider Holcomb. With respect to the southwest corner of Swan and Cleveland, a couple things about that. One would be there is no current funding for any of those prioritized sidewalks. And so that area is a priority 1 sidewalk, but that doesn't mean that just because it's a priority sidewalk, we would go forward with it. If we did end up finding some funds, we would look at all of those priority sidewalks. We would talk to every adjacent homeowner. We would get support, and we would build those areas that we're looking for those improvements now. And then for those that are more difficult, we would work more specifically with those property owners at a future time. And so it's nothing that the city is looking to force upon a landowner at this time. That's not the intent of our plan. With respect to speeding concerns, citizens are always able to come to the Public Works Department and request speed bumps. There's a speed bump application and a way to seek to have that occur. And so I recommend seeking out that process. And then with respect to the last comment on specifics and details, I know it can be frustrating when, the plan is lines on a map. It gives general locations, general sides of the street, but it doesn't say exactly what would happen in front of someone's house, whether that mean up against the house, whether that mean remove a hedge, whether that mean an impact to a flower bed, whether that mean impact to a driveway, all the various things that can occur. We look at those on a case-by-case basis during design, and we're pretty far away from design right now. So the analogy of a 10,000, 30,000 foot plan, the TSP is a 30,000 foot plan. This urbanization plan is kind of a 10,000 foot. It brings it one level down, but down at the design level, the 1,000 foot and lower, that's just not the intent of this plan. And so, but we would be happy to have any conversation anyone's desiring to have and look specifically at their case and show them what would likely happen if this were to be implemented. And I think that answers the questions. The only other questions would be the written testimony that we had. There's a lot of extra stuff in there, and we would strongly encourage that citizen to talk with us either after this or on another day. I think there's a lot of things we can do to answer some of those questions. But since they're property specific, I think we would leave that to a separate time. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
I have several.
Okay, keep going.
Okay. On that study, can you go to page 30? And this was in Mr. Wheeler's presentation also. 57% travel by, where'd it go? 57% travel by car, 91% walk. If you look at questions 2 and 4 on the survey, those numbers are reversed. The survey says 91% drive and 57% walk. So which one's correct? That's question number 1.
Okay. Do you have any answer those individually each time?
If you have the answer.
Yeah, I don't have the answer. I'll have to look at the study and see if there's a writing error there.
Okay. Go to page 46. A little further down. Where it talks about mailboxes. I think it might, it's the next page. I'm sorry, I thought it was on page 46.
There's 2 different numbering systems in play here. So this shows as page 47 that was typed in, but the actual page number on the screen is 43 if you scroll down to the bottom of that page. But you might be off 1 or 2.
Okay, well, I'll tell you the issue and you can research it. Same thing. The graphic in this final report says 63% of the residents want to keep the mailboxes the way they are, and 37% want mailbox banking. Go to question 11 in the survey, those numbers are reversed. 63% say they want banking and 37% say leave them alone. So again, which one's correct? Another small issue I had, and I don't have the page number, I'm sorry, but there's a comment in the report that says that residents or respondents do not want the city to widen the streets. But the actual question was worded that it's not important to widen the streets. And it's probably, not a huge difference, but I don't like to see a conclusion written in a report that's different than the way the survey was questioned. There is a place where I believe 4 different options for traffic calming were presented: traffic circles, speed humps, speed bumps. Was a reduced speed limit on any of these narrow streets presented as an option for traffic calming, like a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit on these streets that are undersized widthwise? Was that presented as an option?
No.
And why is that?
When we were looking at traffic calming, there's an entirely different process for speed limit reduction versus traffic calming. And so we were looking at traffic calming devices such as roundabouts, traffic circles, speed bumps, bulb outs, things that could structurally be put in place that would calm traffic. Studies have shown that those are what actually slow people down. Signage doesn't normally slow people down. It usually makes people feel better because they see a lower sign, but it doesn't actually change the actual speed limit. And so that's why from a traffic calming perspective, we were giving structural changes that would physically change the speed. It would change behavior.
Okay, well, it's just interesting because one of the two most important things that was brought out in the survey was speeding. So it seems to me if you lower the speed limit, I mean, some people are still going to speed, but at least you set them a different, a lower bar. I believe it's page 43, but again, the numbering could be off. And I hope it doesn't seem like I'm nitpicking, but it really bothers me when I see stuff in a survey or a study that we're going to ask our commissioners, we're supposed to recommend to the city commission, and it to me is incorrect. Top left corner there, it says trail through Charter Park will require a voter approval. And that's not true.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that one again?
Sorry, in the upper left-hand corner there, you can see a note that says trail through Charter Park will require voter approval. And I'm not the city attorney and there's no representative from their office here tonight, but I don't think that's true. Because in our charter, chapter 10, section 41 talks about that the commission may not do any of the following items without a vote of the people. And one of them says change the status of a natural park, construct building, whatever, except for the construction of trails. So we've got an exclusion in the charter that constructing a trail does not require a vote of the people. So I don't believe that note should be there.
Yeah, and I'll review that with the city attorney. Our concern was the interpretation of that. Trails within a park, such as a walking nature trail, is an okay thing to do in a park, but one that goes through and creates a thoroughfare, that's what we thought was not charter protected. And so, but I'll check that with the city attorney.
Okay.
That was our thought there.
Okay.
And I just want to comment, I don't think you're nitpicking. I mean, we've read this thing like countless times, and sometimes it can become quite a blur when you're looking at it every day. And so hearing the independent things, even if we, goofed on some grammatical things here, is very much appreciated because it's a fresh look that is very hard for us to have.
Okay, thanks. In the staff report, there's a comment on a couple of at least of the street sections that says parking will not be restricted. What does that mean? I didn't understand what that means.
I would have to see where in the staff report that was discussed.
It's not this, it was a different document we were provided.
That was my staff report.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was in the findings.
Yes, right, it was one of the findings. And I believe it was on the street section it was talking about there was no dedicated parking lane. But the comment was made, parking will not be restricted. Does that mean there won't be no parking signs?
Correct. That was my understanding from Josh's input, that there would be pavement, sidewalk, and then pavement, and there would be no red curb or no parking signs, and so people would be able to park wherever there was a curb to park against, with no restrictions.
Okay. All right.
Correct.
Thank you. I think I've got two more questions in there, and they're kind of general, and I just want to throw them out there. Were any options presented that were, I'll just call them asymmetrical? I was surprised at very few of these street sections had a bike lane, but several of them had parking on both sides of the street. Do we ever consider parking on one side of the street and a bike lane on the opposite side of the street? Because in this survey, there was, I think it was 62% that said that they would not feel safe riding their bike even with the addition of a Sharrow. They're looking for some sort of a dedicated bike lane. So do we ever consider that sort of thing?
We did. We looked at various scenarios where the sidewalk or the bike lane may even go from one side of the street and then to the other, depending on the block, based on environmental reasons, based on existing development reasons. We looked at some areas that said, you know, should there be sidewalks on both sides of the street or just one? And that's why you see in the sidewalk prioritization plan, those lines are only shown on one side of the road. They're not shown on both sides of the road because the intent is that due to numerous reasons, you would have to kind of go back and forth and kind of do that. We considered that with the changing of parking and bike lanes, and that was something we actually talked about a fair amount. We ended up finding that that would be not terribly safe to create some areas, but not all. Like if you're gonna have a bike lane, you kind of need to have it all one way or not. And then if you need someone to be able to get back the other way, so then either you need a bike path, because you're not supposed to bike on a sidewalk, only a path. And so you need that north-south or east-west way to do it, not just a one-way. And so it became a challenge for us where we kind of had to say one road has bike lanes and one road has parking because there's not room for both in most cases.
Okay. And you kind of alluded to my next question. To me, a potential conflict accident between a car and a bicycle is going to be worse than between a pedestrian and a bike. So why is it we don't build shared use path for bicycle and pedestrian and get the bicycles off the street? Because you know, like you just said, you're not supposed to ride your bike on the sidewalk. Well, you know, add a couple of feet and make it a shared use path. And cars get the road and pedestrians and bicycles. Because to me, you're going to have less serious, the potential for less serious accidents.
Sure. And again, the challenge with this area is how to urbanize an existing constrained area. There's not enough room for all that. That is one in most cases. We do have a plan in the document that does show potential paths. The one that you commented on, the charter parks, is the one that shows those paths. We were looking for ways to create regional connections, and we looked at the Trails Master Plan and the TSP projects to find out where those are and how we could try and get those a little more dialed in. But there's just not opportunity. That's the biggest challenge. The biggest challenge with the whole neighborhood is finding a way to get it to a desired urban standard while keeping that rural feel. And so I agree, if we could, those are great ideas. I just don't feel like we have the available room to do that.
Just one general comment, and then I'll stop. Almost without exception, anything that comes before the Planning Commission, the first thing we hear about, second thing, pardon me, traffic is always first, parking is always second. But we didn't hear anything about parking in this one, and it just seems to me like the street sections overemphasize on-street parking at the expense of bicycles. So that's general comment, and I'm done.
Okay. Nothing? Okay. Commissioner Staggs.
I was curious, what initiated or triggered the study?
I've been in this position since 2018 with various staff. We've had a small bit of turnover. When we go through development with private development and have to apply the code and the TSP to those developments to determine what the roadway standards are, it is the most difficult area of the city to apply that to, because the cookie cutter approach of chapter 1612 of the code that gives us those cross sections doesn't fit in Park Place in most of the areas. And we've seen previous staff prior to my coming on, at no fault of their own, apply standards to try and make it fit, to try and make common sense solutions, to try and make engineering solutions, but they've been inconsistent over time. We've seen it done various ways, And we said, you know, I wish we would have done this 20 years ago, but we didn't. We're here where we are now. How can we try and be consistent going forward? That was the big deal here, was that staff really has had a major challenge using the code for this neighborhood. And this was a way to get us to be more consistent and not have to make subjective decisions.
So it was initiated by the city?
It was.
Right, okay. The second question I had was, when we do surveys related to studies like this, and we get, what's the percentage? 5 or 6%?
It was 5 or 6% of citizens, but it was something like 18% of households, which I think probably is a more accurate representation of responses.
Good point. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess my question is, what weight do those surveys have in the decision-making? Can you talk about that?
I was just doing the calculation for everyone. 200 surveys out of 1140 households would have been around 17%, which is actually a really good percentage. It's a low percent, obviously, but when you look at how surveys are done, that's actually a really strong survey response. Survey responses are not in the high percentages. They just never are. Mm-hmm. We take citizen comments really very favorably and very high. As was mentioned in some of the public comment, a lot of the study was overwhelmed by the Holcomb comments, and it's not the first time that we've heard about Holcomb. And so while we appreciate those comments, those have to be implemented some other way. And so we did listen to Holcomb, but knew that this study wasn't going to focus on that. So what else in the study gave us direction, gave us guidance on what that community wants in their neighborhood, because we wanted this to be a neighborhood-driven plan. Even though staff needed guidance, we needed guidance from the community how to urbanize their area. And so it was taken very much into effect. And that's why I'm actually really pleased that the survey results, when you look at the cross-sections in Survey 2, really show a large percentage. It was in the 60% range, which is a fairly high percentage favoring the cross-sections that we had proposed. If it would have been in the low 50s, I would have been doing more research and probably a third survey, more public outreach, but that kind of showed us a definitiveness that we were in the right direction.
Thank you.
Okay, was that it for things for Mr. Wheeler? Okay, I do have one thing. I know we're not going to talk about any specific properties, but since we're here and we can maybe just do some really general scenarios on, let's say there is a house, maybe it's historic, maybe it's not, maybe it's just in a completely wrong place. And that's always going to happen. It's happened on Gaffney. We got a sidewalk next to a house. What is the process? If there's a house that's just in the wrong spot, someone loses the use of their garage, but the sidewalk needs to go in at some point. So once to get to that point, what exactly happens? Without speaking about anybody's property in specific, just what's the process?
So I guess I would look at this two ways. If it's development, private development, the development is likely going to be required to put a sidewalk in as part of the improvement they want to make. And so that would impact whatever existing structure they are trying to retain. Proximity, otherwise, if there's historic standards that prevent certain things, then that would take precedence over other requirements. Same when you get into natural resources and other things, that starts to complicate things. But if there are no other situations going on, it's just a basic existing house and they want to do more development, maybe they want to divide into 5 lots, that existing house would have sidewalk potentially very close to it. It would just be part of development. And so they have to make that decision, do they actually want to develop then? With a capital project, and you mentioned Gaffney, that's a good example. We had a capital project where we added sidewalk and it was close to a nearby house. In that specific example, the city actually purchased the property because negotiating with the property was something that was not going to work in that case, is my understanding. It was before my time when those negotiations took place. But again, negotiations took place. And so if we're doing a capital project, we want to make sure that we are working with the property owner and finding every possible solution that is a win-win for both. We are not in the business of trying to create the project for project's sake. And even if 90% of the neighborhood want the project, we still want to find a way to work with that one person that is negatively affected. And so that's what we always try and do in engineering. Now, if we get to a point where the project just absolutely is needed from a safety standpoint, and we've run out of all of our options, then the city does have other legal avenues that they could take to try and build that improvement. But that is a last resort that is rarely used and rarely desired to be used. Really, it's negotiation with the property owner. And sometimes that may be, we want to save some trees. Okay, can we go around the trees instead? Or can we reduce the sidewalk from maybe 5 feet to 4 feet? Or, there's lots of little things we can do to try and, use the overused phrase, think outside the box, and find a way that gets what you need, but also doesn't create a substantially negative impact. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does very well. But as you said before, if a specific property owner would like to have any specific conversation with you, they could do that.
Absolutely. We do that on a regular basis. People calling saying, what can I do with my property? If you put a road here, what would that do to me?
Okay.
We have those conversations all the time.
All right. Thank you very much. Okay, anything else? Okay, so our options on this are make recommendations, things we want to add to it, or just send it through, approve it the way it is, or we don't have an option to deny it, do we? What are our options?
You have lots of options. Sorry. All right, so you have a couple things. I heard a lot of questions, not answers to every question, some questions about some of the details on the plan. So I would recommend first the commission decide, are you satisfied with the project? Can you condition what you need? Or do you want to see it again? Do you want the answers to whatever questions that you had? If you want the answers to the questions, I would recommend doing a continuance. We have actually nothing on the agenda for next Planning Commission meeting, so we could schedule it for October 11th. We only have one thing scheduled for October 25th, which is your continuance you just did earlier tonight. And so you have options. There's no rush, so you're not under a 120-day clock. Conversely, if you feel comfortable with the questions and they were just sort of little things that we need to fact check, you can move forward with a recommendation to the City Commission, and we can identify a date for the City Commission hearing. If there's themes that you heard, such as Holcomb Boulevard and the concern for increased safety and enhancements in construction to help address the concerns of the community on Holcomb, you're free to request that staff add something in our commission report about that, or put something in your finding about that. I know it's not totally relevant to what you're talking about, but if you want to drop in a little side comment or have us drop in a comment to the commission that says the Planning Commission heard the community and wanted to pass along this message, although it's not relevant, we can do that too. So I don't know that I'm super helpful, just to say that you have lots of options. I would first consider if you have enough to move it forward, or if you would like to see it again.
Okay, all right, those are good options. So I would support both recommending approval to the City Commission as long as our concerns were conveyed and sent through with it. If we feel we need to continue this because there's some things we definitely need to change or add and they need to be part of it, we can do that too. But it's completely up to the commission. I understand both.
I would like to suggest that in light of particularly the questions that Commissioner Mitchell raised with respect to
There was some messed up numbers.
Yeah, there's some information that we probably should, before we make a decision, that we find out that information. And we're not going to know tonight. And I think there's some other questions that Commissioner Mitchell mentioned about that were not necessarily about numbers, but just general questions that maybe we feel are not being addressed in the study, such as the amount of bike lanes compared to sidewalks, compared to traffic lanes. I mean, I echo his concerns with those things. So I think a continuance would be appropriate rather than making a decision tonight. That's my opinion.
Okay. Commissioner Mitchell, you had a lot of the concerns. Maybe we could summarize the things that you wanted.
I think Mr. Wheeler was taking pretty good notes.
Okay.
I saw him taking notes. I'm comfortable that he'll address those things. And I saw some head nodding going on on the way. So I'll make a motion that we continue this item until our October 11th meeting to give staff an opportunity to address some of those issues that were brought up this evening.
And I'll second it.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Call roll.
Commissioner Stoll?
Aye.
Commissioner Mitchell?
Aye.
Commissioner Staggs?
Aye.
Chair Schlagenhofer?
Aye.
All right, and just to clarify for the audience, though the testimony was closed for this meeting, testimony is still open, it's legislative, new issues are okay. So feel free to send in any emails to planning@orcity.org, or you can drop them by our office at 625 Warner Parrott Road. And yes, we are here and we can continue and you can testify again at next meeting.
Okay. We will move on to agenda item number 3, which is communications. And the only thing I'm seeing on here is the OC 2040 project update.
Yes, so OC 2040 is our comprehensive plan, so our vision for 20 years from now. We've been hard at work for more than a year, talking to the community, trying to understand what our goals and priorities are for the future and how we can best set ourselves up for success for the future. And so we have adopted our community vision, as you know, and we're in the middle of doing our summits. And so our summits, we have a series of 4 summits where we work with the community to understand a little bit more detail from this general community vision on very specific questions. Our third of the 4 summits is on Wednesday night from 6 to 8 p.m. It's via Zoom. You can go to oc2040.com and register, or you can always send us an email at planning@orcity.org or give us a call at 503-722-3789 and we can give you more information as well. Anyone who attends is welcome to get a $15 gift card to a local Oregon City restaurant. So we've heard really good feedback in the first 2 summits, really meaningful, thoughtful discussions, and so it's been great. The format of the summits is a brief introduction from staff on the topics, and then we'll go into a series of breakout rooms, ask a couple of questions, and then respond back to the group, and then another breakout room, and then we debrief after that. And so it's been a really good process, and we're happy to see the community coming, and it's nice to see new faces at these new summits. The summit on Wednesday night is going to be healthy and welcoming community. So it's going to focus on civic facilities, health, safety, and community engagement. And so if anyone would like to participate, we welcome them to the meeting. And I'm here to answer any questions you have about OC 2040. You do have a couple of member representatives from the Planning Commission on the project advisory team as well. And then also, since we are live, we have a couple of openings on our project advisory team. So if anyone is interested in joining the team to help us update our comprehensive plan, feel free. Although there's none for the Planning Commission, but feel free to apply for the other positions.
Okay, thank you. And it's this Wednesday?
This Wednesday, 6 to 8 p.m. on Zoom. We'll see you
Okay,
there.
and it's only on Zoom?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Any questions for her?
Not on that topic, but I do have one question. Speaking of openings, are we publicizing, searching, grasping at straws to find an additional planning commission member?
The city has begun posting for additional openings for boards and committee members. We do have the one available seat, and we have two also expiring terms at the end of December 31st. And so those are posted on the website. I've not had any insight into the direction from the mayor as far as the process to go through the interview process and to refill those appointments. So we do have advertisement for planning commissioner positions. It's a great job. Thank you for volunteering. I'm sure you guys can tell everyone how fun and rewarding it is, but it is on our website, and there is no news on when that hiring is happening.
Okay, so you're not certain whether we're trying to fill the current vacancy sooner than the normal cycle of the January new appointments?
Yes, I wish I had more information for you. I can follow up again with the city manager and provide direction to the planning commission over email.
Okay, thank you.
And for those of us whose terms are expiring, do we reapply, or how does that?
Yes, you are welcome to reapply as long as you haven't termed out for the number of consecutive years that you can be on the planning commission. I will send those people who may be expiring a notice so you are aware of what the process is.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, so I guess I only have one question about that, and that is, so the people that have the expiring terms, when do they need to reapply? When is that cycle? Is that October? November?
You know, it seems like we always pick a date and then we never get enough applicants, so we always extend that date. I'll check in with our city recorder's office and I'll include it in the email to the planning commission as a whole.
Okay, and it's the same process for anybody, even if they're reapplying or a new application, everybody goes through the same process?
It has been that in the past.
Okay.
I'm uncertain on what our process will be moving forward.
Okay. All right, anything else? Okay, we're adjourned.
Recording stopped.